do the unmuting and do the going live.
Any
Does it look
brochums?
horrific? It probably does.
Let's go get
I
ugly
think we're
things.
still there. Hello and welcome everyone to Gamestate episode 18. It is Monday, November the 19th, and today we will be talking about GP Charleston, GP Bochum, and and Star City, Seattle. I am your host, Adam, a winner is you, Ragsdale, and I am fortunate enough to be joined, as always, by our three regular co-hosts, Glenn Jones, event coverage coordinator for Star City Games,
Right here. Hello.
Stephen Flavel, poker pro and magic enthusiast,
Everybody.
and Cedric Phillips, professional magician and magic personality.
That's me. How we doing?
So we are going to start you off with one gigantic segment today. We are going to begin discussing both GPs at the same time because both GPs that occurred this weekend were standard, and the deck lists that we saw in both top 8/top 16s were a little bit different. So we will super quickly just let you know that GP Charleston was won by one John Bolding with red-black aggro/zombies, depending on how you want to classify it. And GP Bochum was won by one Martin Yuza with either Crater Hoof Behemoth Reanimator or Hoof There It Is, depending on your naming nomenclature. But the first place we are going to go was the most populous deck among both top 16s, which was green-white aggro. We saw a whole bunch of different aggro lists. Sam Black and Brian Kibler played some non-humans deck. There were a couple humans decks going on. I want to know how you guys feel about the various green-white aggro decks and where you think they are going to go in the future, because they were the most represented deck in both top 16s. Cedric, you get to go first.
Well, being a humans aficionado, or at least trying to be, I was a little bit surprised to see so much of this deck over the course of the tournaments. All three of them, really. But there was like the most played deck on day two of GP Brochum. I think it's pronounced Brochamp, perhaps. But no, it was the most played deck, and I was like genuinely surprised. I had tried this deck when I first started testing standard last week. It was the actual first deck I went to. Obviously, I love a white aggressive deck, and there were some things I liked about it, and there were some things that I hated about it. One of the things I didn't really like about it very much was how great Champion of the Parish could be and how poor it could be. It was a varying range, but like the cards that were definitely good in the deck were like Rancor, Selesnya Charm, Silverblade Paladin, and Sublime Archangel. So anytime you see those cards in a deck, it's completely reasonable and like kind of unsurprising to see someone do well with those cards in their deck, because those are such powerful cards, and the format is in such a way that it lends those cards to be quite good. It's not. I guess it's not horribly surprising. I think the issue that I ran into is like there were so many options of cards you could play in green white that it takes a little while to find like the correct 60 to 75 cards that you want to play, and then the numbers that you want to play them in, because you can make an argument for playing almost four of all the cards that you have access to in green white, where you see some people have a couple of Sublime Archangels instead of four, or a handful of Celestial Charms instead of four, even though Charm is so good. Are you supposed to play four Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, even though it's a legend, because like you need to draw one so bad? In the end, I think that it's a deck that we're going to see a lot of moving forward, and I think like people are going to be shifting the numbers in and out quite a bit. I mean, if you look at Brian Kibler's deck list compared to Sam Black's deck list, these two are like they're trying to get to the same place, but they're so different in like the slots that they have, like Silverheart in one deck and not in the other, and just they're very different decks. So I think overall there's a shell there. It's just hard to figure out what said shell is.
All right, Glenn, do you have any thoughts on the green-white menace?
Yeah, the deck has actually been a little more impressive than I remember first thinking it was. If you were watching Dallas, my much maligned hatred for Sun Petal Grove was present there. But the deck is a little decent. I've been playing against it online a fair bit, and it's kind of interesting how a lot of the answers you would think are like really good against aggro decks are just not quite there against it in a lot of instances. Like Supreme Verdict is hardly like that big a deal. It's obviously like you got to know how to play when you're up against a deck that has access to that kind of a threat. But generally, it's people who can keep pace with like presenting a game at the same time as you that is kind of troubling. It's one of the decks that made me think, is it Staticaster might be a card that's actually on the way up. I've been like goofing off with the Angel of Glory's Rise deck, and Staticaster's reasonable against green white, and I think that we'll be seeing decks shifting to view green white as like one of the aggressive decks in the format that's just like very different from zombies. Even we saw like this weekend, the zombies deck, like slowed down during the Grand Prix weekend. Like the bigger one was more successful, so it might be that green white is actually the fastest of the aggro decks now.
All right, Steven, do you have green white thoughts for us?
Yeah, I really am fascinated by Gavney Township. I think it makes all of the different green white lists very interesting because there's just the question of how many you can actually play and still be able to cast your spells. And I think every single person has a different idea. We've got like the 13th place list in Brocham for Gavney Township, and just like every color. Like we're playing Armada Worms. We need 2 green and 2 white. Pretty bad. We've got lists which are like cutting one of the colors, so we're like almost white weenie, but we're splashing for Gavney Township, and that lets you get more Gavney Townships, like more consistent mana than if you play both the white and the green. And I think people have done that on both sides. Somebody was playing like white weenie with Gavney Township, and then I think Sam Black was playing green with like white splashed for Gavney Township. And then Gavney Township's like even showing up in the Crater Hoof Behemoth decks. Like, why wouldn't it? So I find that fascinating. Mana bases are really exciting, especially at the beginning of a format, and people very clearly have very different ideas of what they're meant to do with them right now.
All right, before we head off to the next deck list, do you guys think that, I mean, I know last week I asked you if we were going to be in a place in the metagame where aggro became good again, because people were so heavily control trying to stomp out Thragtusks that tiny monsters would just get them. Do you think what we saw this past weekend was a result of aggro being good again?
Who's going first?
You're going first, Sad. Sorry,
okay.
I should have.
Yeah, that's fine. I was ready to jump in anyway, but like I think that aggro. I don't ever think that aggro was a poor decision. I think that finding the correct way to go about beating Thragtusk was the number one thing to figure out. And once the aggro decks figured out how to go about doing that, then they could evolve, and you're going to see more of them winning. And you see the red deck with Pyreheart Wolf and Undying Creatures kind of be able to take out Thragtusk and like Ban Control's Wrath effects. You see the green-white decks going over the top with like Sublime Archangel and like Rancor and Celestia Charm and stuff like that. So it was basically people needed to actually play some games and figure out what's the best strategy to beat Thragtusk. Like, do I need to go under it really, really fast, like Rakdos Cacklers and all this nonsense, and just hope they like don't draw one, or hope like when they do cast one, I threaten it, like you saw some decks with 4 Mark of Mutinies, or do I go over the top of it, like in the air with Falconwrath Aristocrat and Thundermaw Hellkite and Sublime Archangel and stuff like that. So I'm not entirely surprised to see aggro decks doing well, because look at the tools that aggro has available to them. Like, look at some of the cards that are in print, like Silverway Paladin, like that's a real Magic card. Like Rancor is just legal and like no one's gonna be playing it. Like that's not realistic. Sublime Archangel, that's a card like that can happen. Like aggro has all the tools, but again, there's so many tools available to aggro decks that you have to find the right 60 or 75 cards to make it work. And I think that's something that isn't obvious on the surface to do. Again, you look at the green-white decks, and you can compare Sam Black's and Kipler's decks if you want to, or you can just compare, just look at a bunch of green-white deck lists. They're just all different. And they all have different and varying numbers. So you can do that as well. And you can see they're all trying to accomplish the same thing, but there's many different ways that you can go about doing it.
Would you, as someone brought up in chat, would you put black cats in your sideboard of your
Black
green-white deck?
cats?
Yeah. Oh, maybe you weren't aware. That is a thing which happened in one of the green-white decks in the top 16.
Tell me more.
The gentleman piloting it just determined that he would not need those 3 sideboard slots, so he said, and I quote, that he was putting them there to jinx his opponents.
That is wow.
Yeah, it was pretty awkward. My favorite part was that the coverage reporter was like, I guess we got to give some respect to someone who can top 16 at GP with 3 black cats. And I'm like, I don't know if respect is the word.
That's the first place I went. You, sir, are a man.
That's a 72 card deck right there, my
Well, note that
friends.
if he wins the tournament with 3 Black Cats, all right, now you're talking respect. But anything less than winning, and you can just point at the Black Cats and make fun of that guy. So like,
And also,
yeah.
there is one thing that someone brought up in chat really quickly about Gavany Township. Like, and Steven, you brought up the point of Gavany Township. When I was testing green white, oddly enough, I didn't even like Gavany Township in the deck. And when I played against a green white deck a couple times, I saw them play a Rogue's Passage, excuse me, the land that makes a creature unblockable, and I was losing to that more. Like, if it was Gavany Township, I would have been like, I don't care. But like, I can't block your guy. Like, if I can't block like your Silver-Hearted guy or your Sublime Archangel guy with all those Exalted triggers, so even like something like that, which is like you see the person with like 4 Gavany Townships, you see people with Rogue's Passage, like it's crazy. Like again, there's just so many ways that you can go with an aggro deck right now.
Somebody had Cathedral of War too, just like
Yeah.
keep us guessing. Like,
I actually liked Cathedral a bit. I do think Gavany Township isn't that great in like the really aggro versions. I've been playing some decks that included Township, and I think it's more like something you want to have sort of a mid-range deck be able to do going long, where you can just like take control of the board that way in combat, versus the aggressive decks, which aren't usually capitalizing on it because they're creatures. If they're still in play and still like offensively minded, I guess, then the Township's sort of unnecessary. But if they aren't, then it's definitely unnecessary because you don't have any guys.
Yeah.
So I kind of like it in the decks that are doing stuff like Lingering Souls and Hunt Mastering and things like that that are designed to get you into like, the turn 7-ish range where that's when you start really getting aggro. So.
Yeah, I mean, I just find it interesting that you can just do so many things with an aggro deck, and it's so hard to say which one is correct or incorrect.
All right, Len and Steven, do you have any specific aggro thoughts? I didn't go to you specifically, so you might have leftover things.
yeah, that's like. I'm trying to think of the last time we had such a wide open aggro deck as green white is right now. I'm not sure I can remember. Like in the past, it's been affinity sort of limits what cards you can put in it, like in a very obvious way. Mono red decks like tend to be fairly limited in what cards are available. Zombies, they don't have to be zombies.
Not now, friend. We are beyond the zombie limits.
That's true. That's true. Well, yeah, black red actually is maybe the closest thing. The aggro decks right now in this format seem like very wide open. It's interesting to see how different people approach them.
I think we might see a gain in Mizium Mortars coming into it now that like Lockstone Smiter has arrived, so to speak, and is like a real thing. Silverblade Paladin creates some like really aggressive starts off of like a 3/3 champion of the parish, and you need to have like a wide range of cards that can kill all these creatures, and Mortars is one of the few that does it like efficiently. It's not the ideal solution to a Hell Rider, and I think that guy's stock is going up, so that's kind of awkward, but it answers almost all of the other creatures at like a reasonable clip, and obviously the Overload is like a pretty good value against a lot of decks and in a lot of situations, but I think like Flame Slash mode might actually be becoming kind of important on that card.
I think that's interesting too that you bring that up because it also does work out pretty well with like Snapcaster plus that too on like in turn 4. So yeah, it seems like
that's what I've been doing on Moto recently. Actually, is a blue-red like all Mizium deck.
Yeah, it seems like its spots on the curve, how it plays, are actually really good. Actually.
Yep. Ultimate Price also is a card. Like I was trying it out in a different deck. I'm not going to talk about that deck, but I wanted a solution to Hell Rider. And I decided to try out Ultimate Price, even though I could play Dreadbore, because I thought it was a little more important to play the instant speed answer, and the Planeswalkers weren't that big a deal anyway. And I think Ultimate Price is good too. The big problems are like it definitely just is awful against Lockstone Smiter. It's kind of really awkward against like a Hunt Master, but that's not that big a deal. But beyond that, it's like a really good removal spell. I mostly like it as an instant speed answer to Hell Rider that gets through Cavern, since it doesn't do anything related to Cavern.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, there were definitely a couple terror-wielding brews, which we will probably get to somewhat later. There was some exciting brewing going on.
Okay.
I want to get to probably the biggest story at both GPs, since it showed up at both, was the exciting new twist on the Reanimator deck, which we saw issuing apparently from the mind of one Brad Nelson. But it comes complete with 4 main deck Craterhoof Behemoths and Somberwald Sages, and just punches you right upside the head. It was the list that was used by Martin Yuza to win in Bochum, and Brad also made the top 16 in Charleston. So what do you guys think about Reanimator and its exciting new things? Both lists, they had sort of an interesting transformational sideboard thing going on, but I think the Angel of Serenity deck still exists as well. So this time we will go backwards, I guess. We will start with Steven. Steven, what do you think of Reanimator?
I like the list. I like Gavin Township in it, and I think like he didn't even use the hoof at all in the top 8 in his victory. Like the deck is looking at it, it looks very linear. Like, okay, we make the behemoth and we attack them. But there's like a lot of play to the list actually. Like when you put all these small creatures in a deck with Gavin Townships and you have this like very different sideboard plan going on, there's all sorts of stuff you can do. And yeah, I think it's a really cool list. It's a little bit like one of the mid-range decks with more explosive potential, I guess is sort of where it fits for me, and I like that because it's able to go over the top of the mid-range while still having a lot of the things mid-range has going for it.
Alrighty, Glenn?
Yeah, I liked that about Brad's deck too. When he first showed me the list, and he's been working on this particular deck for a while. It was like I think 2 weeks ago when he like had his first list that was like really close to this one. I think the only thing that really changed between then and now were his Lockstone Smiters made it into the sideboard. But he was super excited about the deck. Literally, I me on Facebook at like 2 a.m. like, we broke it, and just like post the deck. And it's good because it can attack in so many angles, and it is so good at like a lot of them. And it really took advantage of the fact that people weren't respecting spot removal in this format. Like Thragtusk sort of taught everyone not to want to run it. And, you know, we mentioned now that like Mizzy-Mortars and Ultimate Price like are becoming good, and it's this reaction to all these cards that all of a sudden are a lot stronger in a one-on-one situation. Somber Old Sage being the card in Brad's deck that just really capitalized on people not having a way to kill it. You could just play it and all of a sudden they're like, oh man, like nothing good's gonna come out of that. They can't do anything. Like it's huge. It also obviously lets him dodge a lot of the graveyard hate. So people were fighting his deck ineffectively post-board, and they weren't set up pre-board. What else can you do at that point? You know, you're just behind. The deck did really well, just aside from like Brad's top 16 and Juice's win. There was also a top 16 from Juice's friend Lucas Jaklowski in Bochum, and Raptors started off day one of the GP like close to undefeated, I think, right? Or maybe actual undefeated. I know he did.
Crushing.
Yeah, he was doing very well, even though he didn't like wind up finishing out on day 2. So deck clearly real, and you also have to take inside like it was probably the best performing deck, like in the field. I don't know how many people actually played it. Like definitely not that many. I'd be surprised if the number was higher than like 10, and it could easily have been as low as 4, because those are the only people I know played it. I know Brad tried to get some other people on the train. So when you consider that kind of stuff. The deck seemed like it was just like a great performer for the field and should be pretty good online in the future. I know I have encountered it a lot online. People are playing it. I get the feeling that Brad may need to post in his article how to sideboard with it, because these people are sort of committing harakiri here in the games 2 and 3. But that might change in a few days once Brad actually shows people how the deck really works, which will be a little disappointing, I suppose. It is another deck that gets randomly housed by Is It Staticaster, for the record, but I think it was a good deck this weekend, and I think that it won't need to change a lot to stay viable, although I don't think it will be as good now that people know, oh man, what's the worst that could happen? They know exactly what the worst that can happen is now, is a Crater Hoof Behemoth. So...
Yeah. All right. Real quick before I get to Sed, I will go to you in a sec. I just want to run it back on Glenn for being our de facto expert on this deck. It seems like that list was a lot better at actually causing you to be dead, and capitalized on the fact that people were taking like all the random shocks out of their decks that used to be in the format like a month or 2 ago. Like it feels like if people were still in 4 Pillar of Flames in your main deck, we can't play this deck. Do you think that's accurate?
Yeah, no, Brad was pretty worried about his Mono-Red and Jund matchups, those two particularly. To which I remarked, it's not the first time you've been dead to a Savage Lands. It will not be the last. He doesn't mind playing against these mid-range decks when he just doesn't think there will be that popular, or if it's the right weekend. So, I think that he got the dodge he wanted. Really, mono red didn't seem to be that popular. I know there were people playing it. Some people said to me that when they were on site that they saw a lot of it, but it didn't seem to appear much at the top tables. And the decks that did well were definitely like fine against mono red. So I wouldn't expect to have to worry about it too much, at least in real life. Online, it's still a cheap deck and going to show up in big numbers. As for Jund's going to have to restructure with the new opponents in the game. Maybe they don't have room for stuff like Pillar of Flame or whatever. I know I like playing Pillar of Flame right now. Zombies is still a deck, and I think its stock is going to go up. So, maybe Brad's deck will shift down a gear, be sitting on tier 2 until, the time rises when people can cut these cards from the deck again. It's definitely going to be a back and forth action, I imagine.
All right, Said, as I so rudely interrupted you, go crazy.
No, you didn't. You were just fine with your Eagles hoodie of a losing team. But
Hey man, I got this for free.
yeah, that's because they're probably not expensive right now. Glenn, you actually made the point that I was going to make right at the end of your right at the end of the thing that you said, which is this is a deck like moving forward that it was a really good deck for this particular tournament, and it seems very poor to me moving forward. And the reason is this: if you guys remember a few months back when Christian Calcano won his Grand Prix, Brad got runner up with a Warm Coil Engine Grand Architect deck. And this deck feels like the exact same kind of strategy of just when I saw Summer World Stage, I immediately thought, man, like he had this 3-mana thing last time he did well that produced like a bunch of mana, and then like it didn't die, and then he did something awesome with it. The opponent's like, oh shit, I can't do anything about that. And it's like Worm Coil, Behemoth, and like Architect and Summer World Stage. And then, after the tournament was over, and like Brad going to that tournament, he's like, my deck's insane! And like it was insane for that tournament. And then like other people played it, and they're just like, yeah, man, like Jig's kind of up, like gonna deal with the Architect, and then you're gonna have like these Worm Coils, or like can just beat the Worm Coils. It's like Jig seems like it's kind of up with this deck too. Like now, like everyone like knows your plan of like, yeah, like Summer World Sage. Like I'm sure when he was playing on the Grand Prix, they're like, that's kind of cool. And like, hey, you're Brad Nelson. What are you doing over there with that Summer World Sage? Can't wait to find out. And he's like, and you're dead. Like, that seems like that's what was going on. Like, and in that Grand Prix where like he's casting Grand Architect, and they're like, man, Brad's so cool, this Grand Architect. And he's like, how about 2 Worm Coils now? And they're like, geez, this is not fun. It's the exact same thing to me. Like, this deck may have some more staying power because, like, it can be more versatile with, like, how it sideboards, and, maybe he can change his main deck and be more of a Frights deck instead of, like, this all-in Crater of Behemoth combo deck. But they feel, like, very similar decks to me. And, like, again, I feel like, it was a completely reasonable decision. Like, this... Martin Juzo won the tournament. Brad had it very like it was a fantastic choice for the weekend where people like don't know what's going on, they don't know they're going to be sideboarding. But once like the 75 is revealed and people understand the strategy of the deck, it seems like it's just going to be much worse going forward. Glenn, I know that you said you've been playing against it some online, and I expect a heavy influx of it online, and and like maybe next week in San Antonio, and I don't expect similar results that we saw this weekend again because people know exactly what is going on now. So I think it was a fantastic choice for this weekend. The deck gets covered, it breaks out. People aren't really prepared to be able to beat it, and it could be a situation where like people know exactly what's happening in this weekend. They just don't have the tools to beat it in their sideboard for this particular weekend. Like you said, some people may not be able to kill Summerwall Sage effectively enough. But like moving forward, it seems like people are going to have that deck in mind, that strategy in mind, and again, it doesn't really seem terribly difficult to beat if you want to.
All right. So you don't.
I don't know, dude. That's a really angry thing.
You don't fear the hoof in future?
No, I don't feel like the 4 of hoof deck. I know that Brad was like, I want to dodge Jund pretty badly, and I think the reason for that is because of like Slaughter Games seems like a wrecking ball against this deck, or decks that just can control the like the mana producers. Now it seems like this deck will pick up on ant control decks and stuff.
I hear Olivia's like fairly
bad.
Yeah,
I was going to say, Olivia was the card you could just never ever beat in a million years.
Yeah, sure. That seems like an absolute nightmare too. I forgot about that one. Yeah. It seems like Jund in general is a poor matchup because it just cleans up on creature decks. I don't think that deck is very
almost
good.
Every spell is bad for him. So
I don't particularly feel like that deck is good at all.
Thank God. Yeah. That's not so bad.
So going to the tournament trying to dodge that deck, I think, is like completely reasonable because I just don't think that deck is a good deck. It doesn't really do anything except for kill creatures and then try to kill someone with anything. So like dodging that deck, trying to dodge that deck in the tournament is a completely reasonable plan, and it obviously worked out for him. But I think moving forward, and maybe this deck causes an influx of Jund or something, you know, like who knows? But I think it's a pretty easy deck to beat moving forward.
All right. Well, let us go to our largest segment, which will contain the most decks. I want to talk about blue-white base control decks, which I will include, or in which I will include blue-white flash and also Bant, the blue-white-red mid-range thing that's been floating around forever, and I guess we can include like Kurt Spice's Esper list that just wanted to take people to the Frown Yard that happened to be in the top 16 of Charleston. But we will start with Glenn, since you never get to start. How do you feel about the vast array of blue-white control decks in this format?
I was pretty excited about them. I like playing the blue-white deck. I'd been playing it a lot over the past few weeks, and I expected it to be good, but have to shift in order to remain a contender, really, because people realized Cavern of Souls is, in fact, something they should probably be playing with in this format in a lot of situations, or just making the Syncopate like a really bad card. And those were the decks that seemed to do pretty well at both Grand Prix. Like Cavern of Souls was a huge factor for the black-red deck that won. Obviously, Brad's deck, I think, is quite fine against blue-white flash. So yeah, it was definitely a big deal, and blue-white did shift. Jerry's fix was to give himself sort of the same angle that the Bant control decks can make with a giant angel being accessible, which is definitely an interesting shift for the blue-white flash deck to have a 7-mana sorcery creature. But that definitely probably people didn't expect it, and it's the kind of card that when you didn't prepare yourself for it, it will definitely just kill you. And I don't think anyone would see it coming, generally speaking. So kudos to him on that one. It seems like a pretty good option. I think that we'll be seeing lists go closer to Reed's Bant list probably when it comes to these blue-white decks. You definitely there's a lot more value to playing control, I think, than aggro. The blue-white deck can no longer lean so heavily on Azorius Charm. There are too many creatures that are giving you a lot of grief, like Hell Riders and the Zombies X back, and the green-white deck can be so brutal, and people are trying to hoof you now. It's just there's all kinds of nonsense out there. So we can't just try to get to the end game in like reasonable shape and then pike someone to death. We actually have to have like either a stronger end game and like actually get there in really firm position and not lean on something as weak as pike, or be a little faster ourselves and go aggro, like return to the Geist Shell. I'm personally like I've been taking some of the elements into a blue-red deck and trying that, and it's winning, but it doesn't seem especially promising for the record. So yeah, we'll keep looking, I guess.
All right. Cedric, how do you feel about blue-white control decks?
Naturally against, as I always am. But one thing, and again, Glenn, you're so smart that I did like about Jerry's Flash deck, which I hated about the original versions of Flash, is like the Flash deck that Adam Prozac originally designed. When you're playing against that deck, they just do nothing, and they're not playing to anything. Like they're not playing like the game plan is to delay the game and delay the game, and control the game. But what are they delaying the game to? Nothing. They're just delaying the game. So like when I've been playing against them, and I've never lost to the deck online. I keep track of my results in a spreadsheet. I'm 13-0 against the deck. And there are times when the deck resolves a Sphinx Revelation for 6, and I don't care. Because what are they going to draw into? Nothing. They don't draw into actual anything that I care about. Whereas Jerry has an Angel of Serenity. So he's going through all this work of like controlling the game and drawing these cards and flashing back these cards. And he actually has something to draw into that I care about and probably can't beat when he draws into it. And that's one of the things I really like about his deck, is that the one Angel of Serenity, there can lead to some awkward opening hands with having that in the opener, but, for the most part, having it as a singleton, it actually gives him a way to close out the game in a reasonable fashion, whereas Runechanter Spike obviously does a nice job of closing out the game, but it's not a for sure thing, because it's not incredibly difficult to deal with, in my opinion. That's the problem that I have with the control decks in the format, is like they do all of this stuff, and they have these really, like, controlling cards, but they're not really leading in anything, where if you look at, like, control decks in the past, I, in like Kithkin days, hated 5-color control, but at least it was going towards something, which was to cast Cruel Ultimatum. It had a goal in mind. Whereas these control decks right now, their goal in mind is like cast Sphinx's Revelation, but that doesn't get me dead. Like I guess the overwhelming card advantage of it is, in theory, supposed to get me dead. Not actually killing me. Like at some point, when the 5-color control deck casts Cruel Ultimatum, I'm just like, okay, like I don't want to play anymore because I'm dead now because you actually did something and you're gonna kill me. So I like the step that the direction that Jerry took, because he actually has a card to kill me, which is nice. I still am like very far against the ban control deck because I just don't feel like the deck really accomplishes anything. And then like blue white red, the blue white red mid range deck is just like a good, and I feel this way about ban control too. It's just a good card deck that doesn't really like have a focus or a goal in mind other than just like play a bunch of my good cards. And I would prefer to play a deck that actually has a game plan in mind, like a green white aggressive deck does, or some of the other decks in the format. They actually have like an idea of what they're trying to accomplish. I feel like the Bant mid range control deck and the blue and red control deck don't really have a focus. It's just like 35 good cards, 25 lands, and let's do this thing. So that's how I feel about control decks right now. I wish they were more focused.
All right, Steven?
Yeah, so echo like all of the things you guys said. I think everything you just said was right. I liked Ben Stark's list. It's like it's a take on Blue White Flash with sorceries. We've got 3 Jaces and 2 Tamios and Wrath of Gods. And that just seems like a sensible thing to do to me. Something cool about Reed's deck, which neither of you mentioned, is Farseek. I think Farseek's very good, largely because Adam keeps telling me it's really good. And like, I agree. I think that Farseek is one of the most exciting cards to have in a control deck in this format, and having green in your deck lets you do that. I don't know how many people watched the show 2 weeks ago when Adam Prozek was on, and he was talking about how his one of Sphinx's Revelation was the best card in his deck. It was just so amazing. He could do all these things. And I wonder if we've gone a little bit too far. Because, like...
You think 4 is too many?
Now that no one is 4 Sphinx's Revelation, we run the one of Elixir of Immortality, just in case. Like, I don't know. I question whether we have gone too far on that. But yeah, I think somewhere in there is definitely a very, very strong archetype. I was excited to see Delver in the top 8. Like, it was like a blue-white flash control deck, which took out a lot of controlling cards, put an aggressive instance, and put in 4 Delvers. And I was really excited. And then I read the guy's like player profile, and he was like, I would take the Delvers out of the deck and play something more like blue-white flash. And I was like, sadness. Sadness, but I mean, I guess that's where the deck has to be in a more controlling shell. That is what it is. Man, Reed's deck, if you haven't looked at Reed's deck list, it's like a sight to behold. We've got the 4 Sphinx's Revelation with the 1 of Elixir of Immortality, just in case. And then to make sure we can kill them, we have 1 Black Source and a Nephalia Drownyard.
Yeah, the Drownyard is by far my favorite part of that deck.
Yep.
The Drownyard off the 1 Overgrown Tomb. Owen is playing the same, like, 1 Drownyard, 1 Overgrown Tomb configuration.
Yeah. Just in case.
So saucy. Like...
Yeah, this stemmed from like Andrew Cunio's stream, where Cunio has been playing a deck like this because Cunio just loves a do-nothing control deck.
Yeah, never in his
and,
life
like,
has he done anything else. Absolutely.
Yeah, and like the one time that I tuned in on his stream last week, I was like watching, and he had like the Elixir and like Sphinx's Immortality, or Sphinx's Revelation, and I'm like, man, like this is unbelievable that like you're gonna win this way. And then the other guy played a Frown Yard, and I'm like, oh no. And then like he just like reshuffled with Elixir and then just got frowned out. And I think that's when they just moved. I think that's when the change came for them, because I don't think they had a Frown Yard when I was watching him play. And then like Cunio did his thing of like drawing his deck and like grinding him down, and the other guy's just like, yeah, Frown Yard, man. And he just got milled a bunch. It was pretty awesome.
Well, if you want to see someone that's truly taking the Frown Yard route to heart, like I said, Kurt Spice's deck looks like he was playing blue-white, and he was like, these creatures suck. I'm taking them to the Frown Yard. And he just put in as many as he could. So, yeah, we have some Frown Yards.
Is he the guy with increasing confusion in his board?
No, I think that was someone else. There are some things happening in these.
That's a pretty sweet piece of sideboard tech for the 4 Sphinx's Revelation matchup.
And I mean, before we move on, I just want to say Increasing Confusion is Exploding Books. If you're going to cast that spell, you have to call it Exploding Books. Sorry.
Thus decreed.
Them's the rules. That's how it's got to go.
I am looking at Spice's deck right now, and there's like 3 Frown Yards main, 1 Frown Yard board, and then like there's just some like his last name is so
3 creatures, 1 pike.
Yeah, his last name is so accurate.
Well, he has Lingering Souls. I mean, he does actually have more.
He's got
But
like he's got a drug skull reverse board. Not quite sure what that's there for. Also, the 2 Rocks Faithmender, which is a card that actually came up in conversation over the course of the weekend I was in Seattle, because it plays like the Seraph of Dawn role, but it doesn't have 4 toughness, but it gains like the same amount of life. So yeah, this deck, this is nice. There's some nice cards here.
well, what would you entitle Antrazi's deck? Like, would I want to go with what's behind door number 1, but like I'm willing to accept other door puns if you have them.
Isn't there like a Price is Right game where like they have to open doors for a prize?
Monty Hall.
Is it called Money Hall?
Oh,
Monty Hall was the host of the show.
you're just talking about
No,
the
no,
Monty
remember
Hall
what it's
problem?
called.
There's a game on the Price is Right where you have to pick.
Oh.
Goods.
Oh, I don't know that.
Sure. Yeah, I know that was a game back in the Bob Barker days.
Was it Shaheen Sarani?
Say so. I don't think there's an open the door. Is there an open the door game on Price is Right? Isn't like every single thing oriented on guessing the price of something?
I guess this is called Let's Make a Deal. I'm gonna Google this.
Yeah, go ahead. I feel like Ali
I admit to having
Farsi
never watched
kinda
a full
stuff.
episode of Price is Right.
Neither have I.
Well, you haven't
Got
been sick.
Farsi
What
kinda
did
stuff
what did you
was
guys do
really
when you were sick and couldn't go to like elementary school?
School. Yeah, you guys.
Yeah, you watched The Price is Right, obviously.
Fortune.
Wheel of Fortune was on at like The Price is Right was the only thing on at 11 a.m. in the morning.
He's from New
Dude,
Zealand.
in New Zealand, we had 3 channels. All right, you don't understand. 3 channels. Wheel of Fortune 24/7, the news, and The Simpsons. That was.
Not so bad, I guess. Yeah, I think it looks like it's called Let's Make a Deal here. So, I guess we got it.
Who was the host of that show?
Let's Make a Deal. What? That's not Glenn. No, there's a game on the Price. I'm right about this. I'm right.
For the record, I'm pretty sure that the host of that show was Monty Hall. Am I?
Not.
in the chat, we have 2 for Monty Hall and 3
You
for
Googled
Wayne
it
Brady.
yourself.
I
You
think.
literally just got Inception on the air. Like...
No, I'm not conceding. Anyway, the show.
Actual Inception. All right.
I don't know. I think this deck is awesome. It looks like he lost a bet. Like, that's what it looks
no,
like.
Ali does not lose bets. Ali is just out of his mind.
I've been on the opposite side of an Ali beatdown where he drew that damn Vault of the Archangel against me in his 4-color Solar Flare deck. What the hell is that doing in there? Like, that's what happens when you play against Ali. Every single spell he casts, that's what you say to yourself. What the hell is that card doing in there? Just every card. Like, I can't imagine just getting doored. And that's the only person who could realistically, if they doored me, I'd just be like, yeah, okay. There's no one else where that would be acceptable behavior.
Yep.
Ranger's Path, Rakdos Return. This is Ali in a nutshell. It really is.
You should appreciate this, Cedric, because all of Ali's control decks, they know where they're going. And they're going.
Yeah, that's one thing that I like. He has a goal in mind of what he's trying to accomplish. You know, he has a way to win. It's an interesting way every time with Door, and we have Nicol Bolas here, but he doesn't. And Grizzle
The
Brand.
first time I have ever seen Garrick Primal Hunter with Nicol Bolas.
They're a powerful combo.
Never thought I would see that in my life.
This is where we are. It's very nice.
Oh man, it's funny because like Ali, he works at SCG, lives in the area now, and like I don't really get to watch him brew much at all. I know I did get to watch him do some work with Blue Black before the Invitational, although I didn't wind up playing that. But I feel like I just want to know how he designs his decks. Like, does he start at the top or the bottom? Does he decide how he wants to kill them and then figure out how to get there? Or does he decide which support cards are good and then figure out which kill condition he can play at the back of them? Like,
deck building with him is probably very interesting. It's almost like you don't get to see him play enough or anything because I know he lives over there now, but like he's never doesn't really seem like he's like in a playtest group or anything, and so I don't think we really have a good idea of like how his mind works or anything. Like, I think we have like a pretty decent idea of like how Kibler goes about building his aggro decks and stuff like that, like Chapin or whatever. But like Ali is like you just see this deck and it's like if I showed you this 75 with no name attached to him, like whose deck is this? You'd be like, oh, it's Ali's deck, and you just have no idea how like he got to where he got. Like it's just like, why is it only 2 chromatic lantern with what you're trying to do? And it's just like, there's a Kessig Wolf Run in here. I didn't even see that. There's a Kessig Wolf Run in this deck. Like,
yeah.
how are these cards here? That doesn't make any sense. Jeez, man.
It's glorious.
Yeah. It's sweet.
He's crazy, dude.
All right. Yeah. As mentioned in the chat, you give your door trample and you just beat the shit out of them.
Yeah.
All right.
I said Kessig Wolf Run plus Gristlebrand.
Yeah, that's game.
Draw so many cards.
Yeah, it really is true.
All right. Well, the last big archetype I want to talk about, and we can cut some these GPs into smaller pieces after that. But the last one I want to talk about is red black, or perhaps zombies, if you want to talk about. I don't really want to call the list that one zombies because there were some zombies in it, but it doesn't really harken to the zombie decks of yore. But there were 4 red black decks in just the top 8s, I think, of the 2 GPs. Might be the top 16s. And we had 3 very different shells. There was a Mark of Mutiny Sack Engine deck, which I have it on good authority is running all over Moto and is quite common right now. There was a sort of standard Bump in the Night, like super aggro Rakdos Cackler zombie deck. And there was also the deck that won, which ended up with Geralf's Messenger, Hellrider, and Thundermaw Hellkite, and just all these big monsters that are coming to beat you. So what do you guys think about red-black? What do you think it's doing? I will go to Cedric first.
Dude, it's giving the beatdowns.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what it's doing. Deck looks... like, if you look at the deck list, it looks like it's just, like, all over the place or whatever. Like, but it seems, like, completely reasonable to me, like, what he's trying to accomplish. It's just, like... It reminds me of Machine Head a little bit, like, from many, many years ago. Man, I can't believe I just brought that one out.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, like, all, like, the best red and black threats in varying numbers and some burn spells, a little bit of card draw, and let's do this. And, like, it seems like it works. Like, these cards are all really good. Like, even, like, the 2-power 1-drops, like Darkgriff and Gravecrawler, those are really good cards, obviously. The Messenger, Aristocrat, Hellrider's, like, stock is picking up right now, and, like, it's one of the best aggressive cards you can be playing. It's, like, a reason by itself to play Mono Red. I think it's the best card in that deck. And then, like,
Definitely.
Knight of Infamy. Yeah, like, Knight of Infamy is pretty good against, like, obviously opposing white decks, but, like, Detention Spheres and stuff like that. And then Thundermaw Hellkite is a card that I thought, once rotation happened, it would immediately see play. But, like, people are starting to realize, like, if you want to go over the top of someone, that's, like, the best card you can do it with. And, like, this deck has 7 ways right now. The deck list I'm looking at is John Bolding's of, like, going over the top of a Thratusk with Aristocrat and Thundermaw Hellkite. And, like, those things are just, like, hell on earth to deal with. And then, like, it has some reach in these burn spells, and Sign in Blood acts as double. It's a burn spell and a card drawing spell, and the mana's good. Good enough that they can play 4 Caverns, and they have... I see 4 Rakdos Guildgate here, which is like a little bit but I mean, they probably need it to make the mana work. So,
Yeah.
I think this deck is probably good. Like, I look at it and I, like, don't love the numbers. I would probably want to strip some of the numbers, but at the same time, like, the numbers could be perfectly reasonable and correct. So, it feels like a real deck to me.
All right. So before we go to the other people, I want to rebuy on you, Cedric, really quick. Is that your favorite red-black deck? Like, if you were playing a red-black deck, would you be on the big one with the Thundermaw Hellkites and the Hellriders?
Yeah. I want to go over the top of people. I think if you, like, try to go too low with, like, 12 1-drops and stuff, you open yourself up to, like, losing to some shitty cards or, like, making Supreme Verdict, like, much better against you than it should be. Whereas, like, the rest of decks I like to play go over the top of people. Like, Kitskin obviously is an easy example of, like, I like to go over the top of people with Cloudgo Ranger and stuff like that, and like, Spectral Procession. But I like how this deck definitely just goes over the top of you with, like, bigger spells instead of, like, trying to go under you as fast as possible, because I think it's not particularly difficult for a control deck to beat that.
All right. Glenn, how do you feel about the various flavors of red-black?
I definitely want to be, if I'm a red aggressive deck of any stripe, casting Hellrider, just because that card is really good. Jerry called it out in his column, too. He was like, there are not a lot of decks that can beat just, like, a Cavern and a Hellrider these days. And it got proven at least one tournament this weekend. Like, the card's just very, very good and very powerful. So I would be definitely brewing with that in mind. And I don't think you can shoehorn it into a like, centrally red deck unless you're doing stuff like the Guildgates and the Shocklands and the M10s and the Caverns. So I think it was just kind of a necessity on the Guildgates. But in some ways, I almost feel like that's like a good product of necessity. Like, we saw the really hyper-aggressive decks that were running like, 16 one-drops or whatever crazy madness, and they had to run Guild Gates to make their mana work. But in those decks, obviously, the Guild Gate was kind of punishing because you didn't want to be having it comes into play tapped land with that deck, like at any point. You just always wanted to be maximizing your mana as quickly as possible and getting the most value out of your little cheap cards. So the fact that you're kind of forced to play this slower land also incentivizes you, I think, into taking the deck in a direction where you can afford to like go a little slower, be playing more powerful cards. Any momentum you lose, you can just make up in the later turns when you have these sweet cards like Aristocrat and Thundermaw Hellkite that just trump whatever your opponent's doing in like 2 attack steps. So that's where I would definitely want to be. I'm not exactly sure about the mix of spells I'd be playing. There's a lot of merit to the various strategies, and the Threaten deck is a real one. I mean, I don't personally like it, but it is a real strategy and a very good way to get past a Thragtusk. So I would not assume you won't see it at a tournament. But personally, I would much rather be Hellridering people.
One thing we can say before I go to Steven is if you look at the top 8 profiles from Bochum, which I believe is where both Mark of Mutiny decks top 8'd, one of the guys playing that deck actually said horrible, horrible things about it in the top 8 profile. Like they asked him
really did.
what cards you would change, and he was just like, every card. Do not play this deck. It's a bad thing. Don't go here. So some people may not like that deck. Steven, how do you feel?
What deck are you playing and why did you choose it? Black Red Zombies. I don't have time to test or even choose my decks. That's another quote. I thought Glenn's point about the Guildgate making you want to shift higher is a really good point, which I hadn't considered. That makes a lot of sense to me though. And I could see myself playing a deck like this for sure and would want it to be higher. I think that were I to be playing tiny creatures, I'd just be sticking with the green-white sort of builds, because I think green-white has access to more long-term reach, if that makes sense. You have your reach is in the form of like lands which pump your creatures, and spells which recur, something like Rancor goes on a creature and then comes back and goes on another creature over and over again. Whereas the black-red decks have smaller reach in the form of just these tiny little burn spells or Marks of Community, etc. I wonder how much someone got in for with Mark Community. Maybe quite a lot, actually. But yeah, you understand my point, I'm sure. Like, I think that I want very strong mid-range sort of creatures like the Hell Riders if I'm going to be playing this archetype, just because I don't have that from other spells on my lands or anywhere else.
General point of trivia before we move off this topic. Is this the first time a deck with zombies in it has won a tournament since... who was it that won? Was it Joe Bernal? Was that his name? Like the very first zombies deck, like right after it rotated?
I don't think that Joe won.
No, he didn't.
Oh, yeah, someone else won and he was in the top 8.
Yeah,
he was
Todd won and Joe top 8'd.
Yeah, okay, right. But I think we were talking a couple weeks ago about like zombies never winning anything. Is this the first time it's ever won a thing? Like
since rotation, I think so. Yeah.
So this can be zombies' rallying cry on the back of Hellkites and Hellriders and possibly Aristocrats. We were able to get there.
Don't play zombies anymore.
Hey, we're a real thing, okay? We're a real deck.
We did it.
We just had to sell all of our fellow zombies away and play only the like the most playable. We're now working with humans, vampires, and dragons.
They're very embracing multicultural zombies. They will take anyone. All right. Well, let us do a wrap on the 2 GPs. I want your most favorite and least favorite things from these GPs, and then we will move on. And we will start with let's start with Glenn. Glenn, most favorite and least favorite thing.
Most favorite and least favorite thing of which? Sorry.
Of the 2 GPs in terms of deck construction.
Of the 2 GPs. Well, my most favorite was probably the Crater Hoof Behemoth deck. I was really happy to see Brad's deck doing well because I knew he was very happy about it, and I decided not to play it. He made me jealous that I had gone to a PTQ instead of a 661 person Grand Prix, which is going to be my least favorite thing. What the heck, man? I thought it was going to be easier to win that 200-man PTQ than top 4 of that GP, but it looked like I was probably wrong. Like, there were 660 people in Charleston. It's a nice city, all right? Nice city, centrally located on the East Coast. No reason not to show up. I don't know what happened. That was very peculiar, and it made me pretty sad because I was in Philadelphia in a 200-man GP PTQ getting mashed. Not excited about it. Not excited. So those are my things.
Alrighty, Steven, most favorite and least favorite.
My most favorite thing by far is just how fluid all of the archetypes are. Like we just spent 45 minutes or something talking about the color combinations. Now every single one of them has like 1, 2, 3 variations of a playable deck, it seems like. So that's really cool to me, and I look forward to seeing if that sort of stays the same or if it starts to solidify into these 50 cards plus 10 others or what have you, because it's really cool to see all of the different types of decks. Least favorite thing, probably all the do-nothing that's going on. That's just unexciting to me and not where I want the format to be. It's really exciting to see all these aggro decks who are interacting in the first 4 turns and stuff like that. And then I look at Reed's deck and he has like 4 Wrath of Gods and 4 Thragtusk and no other spells which do anything, and did very well in the Grand Prix. So I hope that the format develops past 4 times Sphinx's Revelation basically and into like something that's interesting to watch.
Alright, Sed?
Dude, I was so sure, Steven, that you were going to love the do-nothing decks, so I'm so happy that you don't right now. I really am. I don't know why. I thought you would like that. Yeah, I thought you would just like the do-nothingness of these decks, so that makes me happy.
I like playing those decks.
Okay, that's fair. My favorite things, geez, about this weekend, they're just some sweet things as far as just like just out there things, like the comments in the top 8 player profiles of Brochum, where it's just like, don't play this deck, it's bad, or like, I don't have time to build my decks, or like just Ollie with like his door to nothingness Grizzlebrand Keswick Wolfrun deck. So just like there's like a lot of hilarity, and I find those things to be pretty funny. I'm pretty much with Steven on things I don't like about the format. It's just like I hate a do nothing deck so much, and like I just feel like the deck that Reed played and Owen played, just like very do nothingy. I don't really particularly like Blue White Flash, but I like the change that Jerry made to it. But again, I don't feel like that deck's very good. But I am excited. I can definitely say to like try out these new green white decks that Brian and Sam did well with, and really just put those in gear, because it seems like they're in the direction I wanted to go, and I just couldn't find it myself. So.
Alright, and my most favorite thing is definitely the Door to Nothingness Keswick Wolfrun deck. That is, can it be both my most and least favorite thing? Just, it's all of the things?
So. Easily.
It is my moon and my stars?
Yeah.
Alright, well let's talk about the Star City Seattle, I guess. I know that one Cedric and Terry there should be able to give us all of the rundown. The standard portion was 1x1 Jacob Thiessen, is that correct? You told me how to pronounce it, but I don't
Jacob
remember.
Thiessen.
Thiessen? Punted it. Sorry. With band control. The only thing that I personally noticed being different was that we actually saw him on a red deck in the deck list as opposed to at the 2 GPs, but it looked like pretty much the same old, same old. You guys want to super quick grab a thing and tell us about it? Or Cedric, you can tell us any super exciting things that happened. We will go to you first since you are our man on the scene.
I was there in the flesh. We had a really good match in the top 4 between Black Green Zombies and Band Control being played by Jacob Thiessen. Game 3 was really, really good. Could have went either way. So that was actually fun. It's always nice to watch like a really good close game of Magic. So that was number 1. Number 2, as far as something that was interesting here, there was a lot of mono red in the room this weekend, and it just ended up not doing particularly well. Travis Wu, Corbett Gray, some of the locals were really into the deck, and then they just did not perform well at all. So it's kind of telling that like for a 400-person tournament, who I would consider to be like the top percentage of players in the room playing mono red, not to do particularly well with it. And then just very quickly, Jacob Thiessen's Band Control deck had no counter magic at all and no Restoration Angels, and he was much more removal heavy. So I thought that was a little bit interesting, just to see like no Dissipates, no Syncopates, like no Restoration Angels to combine with his Thragtusk. Made some room for some Selesnya Charms, so his deck list was a little bit different. But there's the added value of everyone expects there to be Restoration Angels in these band control decks. So the turns where he had just 4 mana up and didn't do anything, I'm sure some people got gunshine, didn't do anything when they probably should have. So that was pretty cool. But that's about it. Yeah, it was a good tournament.
Alrighty.
Do you think they cast the spell pre-combat and he didn't counter it? So they're like, well, I guess he has to cast Restoration Angel then. Didn't attack.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And he just totally has neither of those things in his deck.
Yeah,
I really like that.
Yeah, he just like cycles his Aureus Charm. And he's like, oh, thank God. Like draw card. Yeah.
Island, man. Island and Plains, powerful cards.
Yeah. All right, Glenn, do you have any thoughts on the Star City Standard?
I wasn't really there. I was, off PTQing, but I did know that a lot of those guys up there were going to head for Mono Red. There's an amusing conversation on my Facebook wall in which I vehemently badmouth the deck while Corbett defends it slightly. I'm just going to go ahead and say that I think it still deserved its badmouthing. I don't like that deck. I don't like the cut of its jib. I don't like the spells it's casted, except for Hellrider. I'm on board.
Say that it's ugly and its mother dresses it funny?
I don't want to talk about anyone's mom, but just saying.
She's a lovely woman. She just makes poor fashion choices.
Lovely woman, not bright on fashion sense. Yeah. That said, it was kind of bizarre to have all those guys opting for Mono Red. That was not something I would put them on, especially when there was a perfectly realistic way to cast Craterhoof Behemoth available to all of these men.
we should have all known. You're right. We're so stupid. Jeez.
I mean, to be fair, I feel like Travis should have, right?
That's true. That's in his range, I guess. Yeah. All right.
So, I'll give him a little credit there, but yeah, I mean, it was definitely an interesting take on the Bant list. I've been thinking that Bant will eventually consolidate itself as like the go-to control deck for a while, and I'm not sure which direction it will actually wind up in. I feel like Reed's is probably closer than what this guy came to, but who knows? There's so many cards you can play and so many different ways to make the mana to make all your spells.
Alrighty. Steven?
There's a black-green zombies deck in this top 8. When was the last time you saw that deck? A long time ago, right?
I will put the over-under at 3.5 weeks.
Yeah. How many people do you think are excited? They got their playset at the pre-release for $95 or something. Gonna sleeve them up.
Look,
man,
man,
that deck is so unexciting.
The Overgrown Tomb investment can never be bad. It goes in all of the decks.
Every single one. You cast Nicole Bolas and Garrett.
Yeah,
off that
you get them both off your Ranger's path, and then you open the door, get on the floor, and everybody walks the dinosaur. That's how you do it.
This standard top 8 looks more like a legacy top 8 than a standard top 8. I think we have 8 different archetypes. And I'm going to go ahead and say that most of them are terrible. So...
I like stepping out on a ledge. I like it.
Alright. Shall we talk Legacy? The Legacy Open is also a thing that happened. It was won by one Feline Longmore with High Tide. Directly in accordance with Cedric's wishes, as he mentioned last week that he wanted to see High Tide on camera, but did not get his chance last Star City Open, so this week he got his chance. So let's talk Legacy. Let's start with Cedric. Legacy.
See, Glenn, this is what happens. This is what happens when you try to deny me.
Cedric gets his way.
I get my way. Ruben tried too. I feel like you sent Ruben there because you were off this week to also try to deny High Tide. But no, you couldn't stop it from happening. We got High Tide in the semis and the finals, and it was played masterfully and quickly. And all things considered, because there's no other word for it, there were just 2 gigantic ass beatings given out by High Tide in the semis and the finals, and they were in just horribly fast fashion. And I could not have loved it more. Other than that, for those of you who tuned in during the day, there was a match between 2 competitors whose name I do not remember, but there was a Tabernacle of Pendrell Vale in play, and I don't know if any of you guys are watching this play. It was like round 3 or round 4, but Tabernacle came into play. We brought it on the screen, and Patrick Sullivan said, "Well, here we go. It's time to see if this person can pass the Tabernacle test. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, well, in my instances of watching matches, it's normally Tabernacle, Wrath of God. And I'm like, okay. And so the guy plays he crop rotates for Tabernacle. And the opponent picks up and he reads it, and then he puts it back down, and then he pays for it. And Patrick's like, all right, he passed the Tabernacle test. And then he gets a Dryad Arbor and plays a Thalia and says go. And the opponent pays for Tabernacle, draws his card, does some stuff, says go. And the guy just draws his card. Tabernacle kills 3 things. And so Patrick's like, oh no. Patrick's like, oh no, he didn't pass the second part of the exam. And then the guy with Tabernacle, he untaps, he draws, his guy dies. And now we're just like, ah, jeez.
Only the best and brightest.
And I'm like, what's going on here? And so now it's just like, okay, come on, guys. Like, I know this might be your first time on camera. Let's just get it together. It's not that good of a card. We'll be okay. So, like, 2 turns later, guy, like, plays a Knight of the Reliquary. It comes into play. And then, like, the opponent does something, whatever, draws his card, Knight dies. And then the guy with the Tabernacle plays another Thalia. It dies. And it's just it was just unbelievable. It was just so much fun trying to make, like, a positive out of the situation. You know, I'm sure, like, the players were nervous being on camera and everything. But if you're, like, viewing at home or whatever, like, there's only so much that can be done about, like, the creatures are just going off the board at an alarming rate because of the land. Like, just something you didn't think would be possible. So that was honestly, like, outside of the high tide match, it was one of the, like, as far as from a commentating standpoint, it was, like, the funniest thing I've seen in a while. Like, not to bash on the players or anything, because, I mean, it's whatever. Like, nobody's perfect. But, like, just see, like, Patrick, like, prelude it with, like, all right, let's see if he passes. And the guy passes, and then no one passes the test the rest of the game. The owner or the person taking the test. It was just like, it was really funny. That's all. So it was a good tournament too, honestly. Again, if you guys have not got to see, Feline play the high tide deck, it was like breathtaking. Like, I understand that, like, when you're going off for the high tide, at some point you understand what you're supposed to do. But, like, when you watch some combo players play, they're just like, I'm going to remove a red, and then I'm going to do this, and then they, like, think about what they're going to do or whatever, and she's just like, nope, here we go, and just, like, draws her card, spirals, untaps her lands, like she's been doing it in her room since she was, like, 5 years old or whatever. It was awesome to watch, just killing people in, like, 6 minutes with high tide. So, I loved it. Glenn, you can suck it.
All right, that Tabernacle story sounds good. Was there, like, were they keeping track of the Tabernacle kills? Because I would be carving notches in that Tabernacle spell. Like,
yeah, I don't even know how many creatures died. Like, it's hard to say. All I can say for sure is, like, the price on Tabernacle probably went up a little bit after the tournament, just to see what happened.
card is too strong, man.
Yeah.
It cannot be stopped. Feels no fear and no remorse. Glenn, Legacy.
Yeah. So High Tide won, which was cool. Feline, I know, has played High Tide at a number of Legacy Opens. So not surprised by her practiced motions. Clearly, it's just like the deck Feline plays all the time, like most familiar with. There were some other cool decks. The Miracles deck sideboarded Baneslayer Angel, which is not that unusual a thing to see. But he also had a spicy little Luminarch Ascension in there, just in case anyone else had some Sensei's Divining Top ideas on their mind. So that was a cool little bit of tech to see for the blue-white mirror. They're actually, like, it's pretty awkward because all the answers are sorcery speed, right? So you just make your opponent have to start doing things, which is pretty nice for a 2-drop in that matchup, because turn 2 is like the last turn where you get to tap out for something without maybe dying. So I thought that was very cool. The Bugstill deck is my speed for sure. I've been waiting for Deathrite Shaman to make his waves in yet another format, and it seems like we might have an inkling of it here. I know Brian Brunduin played a bug control deck that he liked a lot a few opens ago, but he wasn't quite sure which cards he should be playing or what direction it should go, and yeah, I like this version. I like the idea of playing a Deathrite Shaman and then a Standstill. That seems really sweet. Like, the game can go nowhere good for the opponent in a lot of situations. Especially if you have your man lands. And we saw a Lurin.
Yeah, Martin Goldman Keir's playing that. It was awesome.
So I like seeing that deck show up. It's very fun to watch on camera, and a sweet deck to talk about because it's got such a storied history in Magic. It's the kind of deck for Legacy, you know, in the older the format gets, you know, you say the deck can only get better as each set comes out because, like, each set just adds more cards to the deck. And a Lurin is like that deck, that theory, just like perfectly demonstrated, because every time a new creature comes out, you can cast for free with Allurin, you get to consider it. And over the years, those creatures have been, like big deals, like Cavern Harpy, and then the Dreamstalker getting added in later, like those guys. So like, it's really cool to just see how that deck evolves very slowly over time. You could probably write like an article all about Allurin from like whatever year it came out in till now, and it would be pretty interesting stuff. Yes, I'll throw it to Steven after my Allurin note.
Yeah, Illyrian was like so exciting to me because I don't know how many other people this is true for, but my first exposure to Illyrian, I was like 14. I was playing Magic at high school with my friend, and I had this blue-black deck with Cavern Harpy, because Cavern Harpy is a pretty good creature if you think about it. It's got some power, it's got flying, what have you. And I sat down against my opponent, I had my Cavern Harpy, and he like plays the Cavern Harpy, and I'm like, oh cool, I play that card too, and the next turn I was dead. Like, just
To Maggot Carrier, probably.
yeah.
Are we having a good time? This is fun.
Yeah, and I think it's like the easiest deck for people to get really excited about, because like instants and sorcerers are scary, right? Like if you're just starting, you have the creatures, you know what the creatures do, it's pretty straightforward. Leave those instants and sorcerers for later. But combo decks are also really sweet. And so this is just like you take all the crappy creatures, like the creature base looks identical to what my creature base would have looked like without Illyrian in my deck when I was 14. And then like you just place Illyrian in the deck also, and they're dead. Just like that.
Yeah, Lurin also,
like,
it also has the distinction of perhaps being the most difficult deck to explain to someone who's never played a game of Magic in their life. You're like, okay, well, these are all these cards, and this is what they do. Okay, now forget that, because what this card does is it makes what they do irrelevant, and they come in like at a different time for free, and then that guy's dead.
Yeah. Pretty
the
much.
guy on like the other table.
Yeah, the dude who is asleep and drooling on the table over there, that guy, he's dead.
We also found it interesting in the booth, Patrick and I, how like the symmetrical cards of Legacy aren't symmetrical at all. I always thought that was like pretty funny. Show and Tell, Allurin, Dream Halls. Yeah, you both get to use them. Lucky you.
You sideboard in your Angels of Despair.
Yeah.
And then you get on the Show and Tell boat.
When you saw the black cat in the sideboard, were you like, is this Angel of Despair again? Were you like looking for the situation where he brings it in? Like,
Yeah.
He's there to combat Light Cat. He's the equal and opposite. You know.
He's there to do something, that's for sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's what we got this week, I think. Unless there's anything else exciting you guys want to talk about.
No, I just shoutouts probably. That's
Yeah.
it.
All right. Let's do some shoutouts then, and let us get the heck out of Dodge. Steven, you may shout out first.
thank you for watching, everybody. Thanks for being great in chat for the most part. And yeah, exciting standard format. Looking forward to more. Looking forward to next week. See you then.
Glenn, shout out.
I have a weekend off, I think. I hope I do. This will be really awkward otherwise. So yeah, 2 in a row. Not planning to do anything special with it, but I will be at all of the next SCG Opens after that, rounding out with Baltimore, Vegas, and then Los Angeles. Steven, you're going to come to our Los Angeles Invitational, show your face?
I sure did last time.
All
Didn't
right.
actually last time.
So that'll be a no then. Okay.
Watch from home.
I want to confirm that will be a no then. Good.
All right, well, that's what I'm going to be doing for the remainder of the year before I go bask in the wintry Florida sun.
Sounds real tough, man.
It is.
Cedric, give us your wisdom.
For me, I will be streaming this week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, as usual, at 4 o'clock Pacific time. I think I'm going to take a little break from the Seance deck, unfortunately. Getting a little bit tired of timing out with it / not winning with it, which you know, whatever. I've been having some. The people are angry. I've been having some success with it, honestly, like off camera and some on camera. But it's hard and it doesn't seem incredibly well positioned right now either. So whatever. Other than that, coverage this weekend was a blast with Patrick, so got to do that, which was fantastic. And I'm not sure if I'm able to go to San Antonio this weekend now, which kind of stinks. But other than that, I think life is good, and I'll be on streaming tomorrow and all that good stuff. And obviously, thanks for watching the live recording, guys. It's always a blast to do it.
I just want to say before we go, if there is something that you want us to talk about, not during the show obviously, but during the week and on the day before the show, you can contact me on Twitter is probably the best way. And we do appreciate that. I do my best to try and keep up with all the things that are going on, but I am kind of an idiot, so I frequently miss things. So if there's something you want to hear about, feel free to tweet at me or perhaps at other people, and it will be communicated to us, and we will do our best. But otherwise, yeah, thanks for tuning in, and we will see you guys later. Good night, everyone.
Bye!